Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin, and in today's video, I'm going to do a fabric pull with my jelly roll / binding strips for the Celestial Stripes quilt pattern by Zen Chic, and I have a lot to say about it. But I did a video to discover how many binding strips are in each size shirt. And so I did that. And in order to do that, you have to cut up a whole bunch of shirts, which I did. And now I have all of these 2.5-inch strips of fabric. So I made the remark that now I'm going to have to do a jelly roll quilt. And if you're not familiar with a jelly roll quilt, a jelly roll is a stack or a roll of 2.5-inch width of fabric, which is 42 to 45 inches. And there are a number of them, and they can vary. But I think it's in the 40. Truth be told, I've actually never bought a jelly roll. So I don't actually know, but I have seen them, and I have, kind of yearned for the beautiful fabric curation that happens in a jelly roll, which is why a lot of people buy them, because the fabrics have been put together. Usually it's in a whole fabric line, and they were designed to go together. And then you can pick a quilt pattern that's jelly roll friendly, and it's kind of the work is done for you. Except the problem with me is that's not work for me. That's the fun part. And so I have all these strips, and I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I should explore doing a jelly roll quilt. Anytime you do a fabric pull, or anyone does a fabric pull, there is a place where you have to decide the colorway. And again, this is a quilting term, colorway, meaning just the colors, the fabrics and the colors that you pick to go together. And it's also generally a good idea to have a pattern in mind. Now, you can do a fabric pull without having a quilt pattern in mind, and you can pick a quilt pattern that you love without necessarily having fabrics chosen, but one does inform the other. And so it's kind of that chicken and egg thing. Which comes first? Do you pick the fabrics and then choose your quilt pattern? Or do you choose your quilt pattern and then pick your fabrics? And it's kind of a give and take. It's like a negotiation when you go to start a quilt, especially if you're going to choose your fabrics yourself and kind of insert them into whatever quilt pattern. What I do, and I've done this before in my wedding project quilt video, I talk about 2 different patterns and then 2 different colorways. And so we're going to do that again today, but it's also going to give us a springboard for talking about color. So I started off with these 6, and the yellow I'm including because I had already cut it, and it does already work with these shirts. So if I were to take it out, this is where we started. And I used this yellow in the binding video, how much binding video, because I cut it wrong. And so this was a don't do this sort of thing. But if I'm not using it as binding, it makes a wonderful 2.5-inch strip. So I got these out and kind of just was thinking about them. They really actually mostly work together, and I have them arranged in such a way that they work really, really well together. But if I were to move these around and put different ones beside each other, you will start to see quickly that they're not all the same degree of brightness and saturation. So what that means is this is very vibrant and bright. It's very intense in its color. Now, it's not a dark color, so it's not a dark value, but it is a very bright and intense and saturated color. This one that's next to it is a really lovely blue, but it feels and looks much more gray, especially next to each other. Do you see that? This one is very bright. This one is kind of grayish, even though there's no gray in it. So the blue itself that's in this, it's kind of almost like a polka dot, is a more muted. So when something is less vibrant, I'm going to call it muted. And that generally means it has more gray. And so it's more muted. It doesn't clash, but there is a definite difference between these two. This one, this blue and yellow plaid, is interesting because it has elements that are vibrant and elements that are muted. Where the blues intersect each other, it's fairly vibrant, but with that white running in between, it kind of tones it down. This would be what I would call a blender fabric, because you can see when I separate these two. So I'm going to cover this up. Not really. This works with this, and this works with this. But as you remember just from seconds ago, and this is okay, but it's not clashy, but there's a definite difference in the vibrance of these two. Same with this. When I look at this up close, it's actually a very bright blue, but because it's a very small plaid it's actually got like a navy and white. If you pull the threads, there's a navy, here's the blue. It's very vibrant, but together with the white, it too is a little more muted. And you can really see that when you see it next to this one. So this is very vibrant. Now there are places in it that are muted, but overall the general feel of this is pretty vibrant. And so I kind of took these in and was thinking as I started the process, I don't need to get married to any one of these because it may not work as I add additional fabric. So I knew that probably I was going to need more than the 6 that I started with. And so I would need some things to tie each one into each other. And so it's like, okay, so the first step is, do all these go together? And the answer is yes, kind of. When I put these together, you can see, again, it doesn't really clash, but this is vibrant and in the purple family, and this is not or less vibrant and in the turquoise family. Interestingly enough, this strip would really kind of bridge the gap between them because there's a surprising amount of purple. So this is a periwinkle right here. And if you look over here, it gets kind of muted, but this is actually remarkably close, particularly in feel, to this one. Whereas I would have said that these were closer in color, but they're really not. Which of these are keepers and which of these are not keepers? What I did, I did like shuffle, and I loved these two next to each other. I love these two next to each other, but I don't like all 3 together. So I put this one aside, and then we have 5. And of the ones that remain, so if I take this out, this is the combination. And I just didn't really love this jump right here from this periwinkle cornflower blue to this kind of the color of sea, except muted. And so I took this out, put this back, loved this together, and really kind of liked that together. It's different, but I liked it together. And of course, the yellow serves as a point of contrast. What if these were next to each other? What if these are next to each other? Ooh. What if these are next to each other? That's obviously going to work because this color is in this fabric. And I decided, well, let's start with these 4. Now, before I go further, if you decide to start making your own colorway, and you really kind of have to with shirts, if you're going to go to the thrift store and pick shirts that you like, you get them home and you've got to figure out how they work with your other fabrics. And so you have to make choices. You can throw it all in, including the kitchen sink. And if you stay within one general color with maybe one contrast, you can make it work. One of you, you know who you are, Amy. And I say that with love and respect. Really, more colors, more variance, more disparity between the colors is its own thing. For example, rather than 4 or 6, do 66. And when you do that, the more colors in this family that you add, even if they're muted and bright, eventually you get just this really cool color wash where no one thing sticks out and the outliers make it interesting. But I tend to be more minimalistic and I like a very tight, thoughtful colorway. That's just my style. So if this is not your thing, that is okay. If you are I want to have 150 colors, that is so great. And that can be really, really beautiful. And if you are a Kate at the Last Timely House watcher, and you know she did that Agnes quilt that has been on her channel for ever, 3 years, I think she said. And she did this 1-inch hex EPP quilt, and it goes from green to blue to purple. There are hundreds of colors, and some are muted. Most of them are vibrant, but some of them are muted. But it gets lost in that sea of variance. But what I'm going for is a more tight and thoughtful and simple colorway. It reminds me of, I don't know if you ever saw that movie Wonder Boys with Michael Douglas and Katie Holmes. And Katie Holmes is the young college student, and Michael Douglas is her professor. And he has written this novel, and it's literally, she wants to read it, and there are boxes of it. They're so like single spaced typed, and she reads the whole thing, and he kind of asks for her feedback, and she says, "It feels like you didn't make any choices at all." So that is, I love it. I love that concept of when you're on a creative pursuit, you have to make choices. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but sometimes the beauty is in what you edited out. Sometimes what makes it so beautiful is what you did not include. And that's really where my heart is. So I picked 2 patterns, and I want to start with one. It's by Zen Chic. That's her website and brand. The designer is Brigitte Heitland. I hope I did not butcher that. For those of you that are my European and German viewers, I hope I did that fair. Brigitte Heitland. I guess it could be Bridget, but that's the way we say it. And it doesn't sound nearly as interesting. She has a pattern that's Jelly Roll friendly, and it's called Celestial Stripes. And I liked it because it has an interesting and modern design. Now, the actual quilt pattern is a huge block of border, and then a little narrow trim, and then another block of border, and then the actual part where the jelly roll is. I will probably do just the part where the jelly roll is, or maybe with a border. And before I go further, I want to say I tend to put limits on myself as somewhat as a challenge, but I just have this real strong belief that when you limit yourself, it forces creativity. So, like if I wanted to make a quilt that was only shirts, just no external fabric, just shirts, I have to get creative. As I was thinking about this potential jelly roll quilt, and Destry recommended that I do a jelly roll race, which I looked at. I think they're fun and they can be really pretty, but I wanted something that had a more distinct design element and not as much just strips. I mean, ultimately all quilts are just strips sewn together or triangles sewn together or squares sewn together. But how those things are arranged can make it go from interesting to really stunning and visually arresting. And so that's what I was going for, which I have so many strips, I will be able to do probably 6 jelly roll quilts out of this. And so, of course, I have looked at now hundreds of jelly roll friendly quilt patterns. I don't know why I stumbled on that. Hundreds of jelly roll quilt patterns. And some of you have recommended them and loved your recommendations. And I love suggestions, by the way. Please don't ever feel like it's overstepping your bounds. If you think I might like something, put it in the comments. I watch the videos that you guys suggest. I look at the quilt patterns that you suggest, and it's all great for inspiration. Sometimes I think, yes, and I put that on my, I'm going to make this list. But for this purpose, I am going to start with the Celestial Stripes by Zen Chic. So after I bought the pattern and realized there were, she calls for 32 strips, and I did not want to have to come up with 32 different colors. So what I did is I narrowed it to 4, and I'm going to find a pair for each one. So a buddy for each of these 4, and that will give me 8, which is now a multiple of, well, actually 4 is a multiple of 32 as well. But I can do those 8 and manipulate them in different ways, and we'll accomplish that pattern. So that's what we're going to start with. All right, so you can see here I have a whole pile of fabric, and these were all the ones that I auditioned for my colorway. I started with the yellow because it's the easiest, and sometimes I do that. I happen to have this, I've used this shirt a lot, by the way, in so many of my videos, and I'm not sure I've used it that many times in a quilt. But this to me is just a really gorgeous pairing because it's very close, and this is a shirt, which of course I love. And if you can imagine with me, the way that pattern is structured, it's like a big U of one color around a strip of another. And so that's kind of what I went with. I just am imagining with each pairing that these would go together. So I could do it this way, which is the solid with the pattern on the inside, or I could do it the other way, which is this is the outside and this is the inside of the U. And so every time I considered a fabric, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, will this work with either the solid on the outside and the print on the inside, or vice versa? And so you can see here, as I'm folding this, I'm going to make a little packet. And so that works. So that's kind of we know that's going to work. It's good with this colorway without saying a definite, because you never want to get totally married, because you might get further down the road and go, you know what, the yellow doesn't work now. And actually, when I recruit my younger daughter, who I call the colorist, to help me, sometimes the very fabric that I like the most, and sometimes the one I started with is the one that she says doesn't work. And sometimes we have arguments over that because I don't want to let it go. So, but for now, we're going to start with that. And then I went to this one next because I perceive that that will go with that yellow, which it does. So if I wanted to have this as the solid and this is the print in the middle, it works. And then I'm like, now let me see if I can find a blue that works with this one. So I started off with navy. Actually, this is a linen cotton blend, and that's good. It's close, but even just as I'm looking, this is more muted than this blue in here. I tried a darker navy. This has a little bit of a purple in it, and I felt like it was too purple. So this was muted. It's got a little gray in it. This is not muted, but it's a little dark. This one is, I actually love this fabric. I have bought 3 of these shirts. They're out there. So if you really like this navy with the white polka dots, you could probably find it in your own personal Goodwill if you live in America. So at this point, I realized, maybe navy is not the way to go. So I pulled out this blue, which is far closer to it, and this blue. And I'll be honest with you, even though this is probably the closer color, I liked the way that looked together. I can't really tell you why, except that it's not perfectly matchy, but it has the same degree of vibrance. So this is a little more, again, a little more muted and a little darker. So the value of it is more similar to that blue, but the hue is not exactly right. This one, so the vibrance and saturation of this one is not as good, even though the value is right. This one, it's a little bit lighter, so the value is lighter, but the overall feel of vibrance and hue feels better to me. This is a great time to talk about color has feeling. It is magical. Color is amazing. One of my favorite songs in the whole wide world, like maybe top 5, is the song True Colors, originally by Cyndi Lauper. And honestly, it really could be my life motto. I see your true colors shining through, and that's why I love you. I love color. I love it. And it can give you happiness. It can impart a feeling of nostalgia, joy. It can make you feel jarred and unsettled. I love it. But the thing about that song, True Colors, there is no true color. Color is informed by the colors around it. It's informed with your experience of that color, which is wild. And how you like the mood you're in and what you associate with that color. Someone else might pick this navy because they may have fondness for navy, or they may have hated this color as a child. They may have had a shirt that they hated that was this color. This is actually pretty close to the color of my bridesmaids' dresses, by the way, this right here. And so I have a lot of fondness for that color. And so I decided we're working through this. I'm going to work with that. And when I do that, you can say, oh my goodness, that is really, really pretty. Even though it's not exact, which is another thing that sometimes the colorist and I get into disagreements about, and it runs both ways. Sometimes matching is not actually as pretty as non-matching. It goes. I don't know if you've ever heard that phrase, like they go together. So it goes together, but it doesn't match. And so sometimes my younger daughter, she wants it to match less, and sometimes she wants it to match more. And it really just depends on the colorway. So I kind of was working with that. I have other blues here, and I actually pulled them out. My local quilt shop went out of business, and I am so devastated about it. And actually, they're going to become an online shop, but they had all their fabric marked down, and I got this fabric. I just thought it was very interesting. And so I pulled it out, and actually it's pretty close to the color, but I don't like a busy quilt. I like a streamlined, I like prints, and I want there to be prints in my quilt patterns, in my quilts, but I don't want it to be visually busy. I like a simple, I may have said that 3 times already in this video. So I threw that out because it's busy. And then this fabric is so glorious. Amy, who lives in Africa, sent this fabric to me, and it is, if you're familiar with African fabric, it's waxed. And so it's very, very stiff and feels very unusual at first. But when it washes up, it just gets really, really soft. And so this was a very generous gift. And I actually loved that. But again, I mean, these work beautifully. Actually, all of these work so beautifully together. But I kind of want to save this for something special. And my jelly roll quilt that I have not even committed to making did not seem like the thing that I wanted to expend that on. So I put those aside, put my navy aside, still have this in the back of my mind, but don't love it as much as I love this, which is so interesting because that might actually be it is really the closer color. So I made this as the decision. And then I got to this beauty. This is this was a shirt, which is really kind of amazing. And so you can see, and every strip from this shirt is different. And so that in and of itself is a challenge. So you can see it has this very light, almost gray periwinkle. There's a mint in here. There's this really lovely green that has just a hint of blue in it. There's some blue. There's just a lot of colors here. And so I started with, I think I started with this one. And I was like, instantly, nope, too blue. So I took that out. And then I was like, oh, I'll get out my turquoise linen. And I tried that. Oh, that's also still too blue. And so I'm like, well, I guess it's really more green than I thought. So I go and get green. Ooh, no. No. So this green is too green. It's on the yellow side of the green, not the blue side of the green, which it's a good time to bring up the color wheel. So let's talk about the color wheel. Around the circle, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and then in between them, there's, blue, yellow, green, and blue, green, blue, purple. So the primary colors are yellow, blue, and red. And then the secondary colors are the ones that come from those blends. So yellow and red together make orange. Yellow and blue together make green, and blue and red together make purple. And those are the secondary colors. And then you can do that again and get tertiary colors, which is where you get blue, green, blue, purple, red, violet. And this strip of shirt is secondary, tertiary, and even quaternary colors because they're blends of blends of blends. And so when you take a very secondary green, this is a very good green, very true green. It doesn't work because this is lighter and bluer than that. So I tried another green. This one is called Minty, and it's closer, but it's too light and it's still too green. Now, if I had taken this off the table and just showed you that, actually, that's really pretty. It has a little more blue in it, and that's why they call it minty. Just like peppermint has a slight blue tone to it. And this is the thing about putting something in context. You realize just how much blue-green that blue-green is. So those kind of got nixed. Halfway into this process, I thought, wait a minute, I've been trying to do a darker solid. What if I did, this one is lighter? Honestly, this is the closest fabric that I've found. It is just about that right there. So that's actually really lovely. This is called Sea Glass. It is the right color. But surprisingly, this very vibrant shirt is actually more muted than this fabric. So this, because it's so, I would have called this mint, by the way, it felt a little vibrant for it. And when I put it up against this, it actually does work. Ooh, that's so pretty. I may revisit this. I may come back to this in the final quilt. So that was a good contender. I got this fabric out because I love it. I got this as a fat quarter at my local quilt shop, and I have bought it 3 times because I just think it's so pretty. And I can't find anything for it to work with. So I keep trying, and I sat it down and went, nope. And so that was next. And then this one which again is close. It's closer. So these two are in the same family. Do you see that? This one is a little bluer. It's also, the value is darker. And it would work, but there was something about it that I didn't love. This one, I was trying to get this color, and I just knew that was going to be it. And it really isn't green enough. And then I pulled my handy dandy gingham out, which this is actually probably the closest. But now I've got two prints that are, I don't know, this will read from a distance. This is you do the arm test. You hold it back here. Look, that's almost the color of my wall. It's going to read differently than it will right up next to it. So you want it to work here, but you also, and by you, I mean me, I also want it to work back here. And I just decided I didn't really love it. And then I remembered this really gorgeous fabric that I picked, again, when the quilt store was closing. And I think it is so, so, so pretty. And I just knew it was going to work. And I laid it down and went, nope. It's just wrong. There's like 6 ways this thing is wrong. It's a little too dark. The contrast would be nice if the color was right on, but it's too gray. It's simultaneously not green enough and too green, which that sounds contradictory. But if you look at this fabric, this is very green, but then it goes into that periwinkle. And so it's simultaneously blue and green in the same print. And I really kind of did myself a disservice by using this shirt, but nonetheless, this does not work. And again, if I had 54 fabrics, I could probably integrate this in and it would look really great, but that's not what I'm doing. And so it's not what I wanted. So ditch that. And then I ended up with this one. This is another one of those AGF solids, Art Gallery Fabric solids. And this is the closest. Well, you could make an argument for maybe it's not the closest. This is actually the closest. And all of those are lovely. But I honestly ended up with this one because it's roughly the same value as this other solid. So when I do this and fold this up neatly, that works. Now, if I am going to be actually making this quilt and the verdict is still out, I would probably go on the hunt at my thrift store for a more green than this, and try to really bridge that kind of whatever that is. It's not really a true green. It's a blue green. And so here's where do you see how that's going to go? This is a little on the purple cornflower side. This is a little on the blue-green side. And then we still have this guy to go. And so it's kind of, mostly happy with this. And this is when I would take a sample of this, safety pin it to the other fabrics that I'm working projects, and take that with me to the thrift store. And I probably will actually do that. I'll just keep a little piece of that. And then when I make a thrift store run, I'll just go, well, let me just see if they have that green before I move on. You can see they're very close in value, but just not exactly the right color. It's close. And it's close enough that it would work, but if I could find what my youngest calls the top of the graph, that's her way of saying the perfect one, the top of the graph. It's not top of the graph, but boy, is it pretty. And isn't it pretty with those 3? And so then we come to this last one, and I had to go back to the navy. This one felt a little dark. The polka dots in here are this color. I like this one. This one, again, is actually probably the closest color, but because of the mottled texture and it's a little on the muted side, I nixed that and then got down to, so this is nice, but it's really, there may not be enough contrast here. So this is from white to this color. This is that mottled from this color. And of course, this yellow is going to read almost white in the quilt. This is almost the same value as these others, and so it really kind of needs some contrast. And then I thought, well, what if I put purple with it? Which I actually love, but this is a little too plum. If this and this could have a baby, that would probably be the perfect color. But I landed on this and decided that this was probably the place to stop. And it would give that value contrast. So there's a light, a very dark, and two mediums. And so I'm still kind of back and forth. If I were to find a more purpley or a little bit lighter, like I said, if these three could be blended into one fabric, that would be pretty close to perfect. So this is kind of where I landed. I hope this has been enjoyable for you today, talking about color and quilt patterns and everything else under the sun. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thank you so much for watching.